Okay, so today's class is going to be about a general view of diabetes, gestational diabetes specifically, but we're going to touch on type 1 and type 2 for a minute as well. We'll get more into depth in those in another course, but this course is going to be specifically about gestational diabetes. And I want to show you some probable causes of gestational diabetes. And as a midwife or as a mother, what can you do to, one, ensure you don't get gestational diabetes? Two, I'd like you to know why gestational diabetes is so horrible for you and the baby. And three, what can you do if you've already received a diagnosis? So there's a lot of conversations to have here. The first thing I want to talk about is I do not offer the Glucola testing for diabetes. That does not mean that I do not test for gestational diabetes. It means that I don't do it the conventional manner. So in the conventional manner, you have to drink a very large can of high fructose corn syrup-based Glucola. A lot of women reportedly vomit afterwards and they get false negatives, or they have to retest, or the doctors don't trust the results. There's a lot of problems with that cola drink. One, it causes liver damage. It is an actual high fructose corn syrup. It's very, very hard to process through the liver. And we can go through the impacts of high fructose corn syrup. But the reality is that a mother that is pregnant should never consume high fructose corn syrup under any circumstances. I personally don't think any humans should consume any high fructose corn syrup. And I think it's one of the biggest causes of diabetes in general. But that's kind of a little bit of a different conversation. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. So we're going to talk a little bit about how I test for diabetes. So I just told you I don't offer the big glucose test and the 1 hour test, and I don't offer the 24-hour test. So what is it that I'm doing to see if my mothers are possibly gestational diabetic? Let me show you. I'm using a urine strip. So every time my mother comes, I encourage her. I have a few moms who absolutely refuse to do any testing whatsoever, including this one. And if they are repetitively getting a trace or a 15, this is a 15 here, if this is where you go here, yeah, this is a 15 here, or even higher, then I'm going to encourage them to do a fasting stick test. So I'm gonna ask them to get a glucose monitor and some test strips, and they're really not that expensive, folks. Not as expensive as, having gestational diabetes. And then to test first thing in the morning. If you look out throughout history, the numbers what we used to consider diagnostic gestational diabetes, they're dropping those numbers every year. Not every year, but about every decade. And the numbers that we consider problematic today are not the numbers they would have considered problematic in the 60s. Which one should we go by? That's going to be to your discretion, but know that there's a little bit of wiggle room with the numbers that they're actually using. Okay, so I kind of want you to do the research on those numbers. I am okay with a fasting of 100 or below. If they have consumed food, I'm okay with 120 to 130. By the time we get to the 140 to 160 range, I'm now investigating inflammation problems with the liver. And that's where a great segue to what are the probable causes of gestational diabetes. Okay. Before we segue into that, I want to talk to you about why blood sugar is so important during pregnancy. So the biggest issue with high blood sugar during pregnancy is that, and maybe you don't even understand the glucose insulin cycle, so maybe I should start there. So when you put food that is high in sugar into your mouth, your pancreas your brain and everything recognizes that you have sugar going into your mouth. And your pancreas then starts making insulin and a bunch of other digestive enzymes to handle what you're consuming, whether it be, you put some McDonald's French fries in your mouth and you're chewing them up. Well, your brain is sending down the message to your pancreas, starch sticks coming down, and your body starts preparing for starch sticks to come down, okay? There's so many conversations to have here, and my brain needs to be kind of calm when it does this. But and it starts to release insulin, and it starts to release the enzymes to break down those starch sticks, those fried potatoes. It'll send out lipase and amylase and glucanase and a lot of other things. And that's fantastic. That is exactly what we want it to do. The problem comes in is when we have consumed too much, especially in drinks, whether it be apple juice or whether it be a Coca-Cola or a really high sugary, smoothie. Turn this off real quick. So we can send down way too much sugar, more sugar than our pancreas is capable of producing insulin or and digestive enzymes for. That discrepancy there is really, really horrible, because it goes through placenta and the cord and into the baby, forcing the baby to make insulin itself. So sugar can go through there, but insulin that you made cannot. And I want you to kind of be with this. I'm going to explain it a couple of different ways. So sugar is small enough to be in your bloodstream to the point where it can actually go through the placental barrier and into the baby. But your insulin is not. Therefore, if you have consumed enough starch and enough sugar, you've consumed so much that your body can't deal with it anymore and cannot make enough insulin and enzymes to combat it. That is then your baby's job to deal with that. And the problem is their pancreas is very immature and very small, of course, depending on the size of the baby's development. This sets up, I believe, a lifelong problem with blood sugar issues with the baby. This is not something we want to do. And so I don't want to just talk to moms about, oh, you need to get gestational diabetes testing. I want to tell them how dangerous it is to drink a 44-ounce, container of soda. Don't do that. Ever. Even if you don't have gestational diabetes, you don't want to ever send that much sugar to the baby that your body didn't deal with it before it got to the baby. Okay. And I want to be really clear with that. Even someone who doesn't have gestational diabetes, if you are constantly bleeding sugar into your urine, which is why I do this urine test, you are going to have the same problems a woman would that has gestational diabetes. Okay. So I just want to be very, very clear with that part. And I think that that's one of the things that we should really teach our moms. And I think I need to touch on this a few more times and elaborate here and there. I want to talk about a couple other things too. Consuming fake sugars is just as bad. And let me explain. Even the real fake sugars, even the ones that are like from stevia. So in your mouth, you taste sweetness and your brain says, oh, there's sugar coming, because you have just registered that sugar is on its way. Your body then produces the pancreas to combat that sugar. When it's not met with sugar, there's no sugar there to meet with it because it's an artificial sweetener or stevia or some sort of a natural sweetener replacement. Your registers it make too much insulin, and then it starts to regulate the insulin in a different manner. So let's avoid those too, and let's get better sugars in our system, such as sugars from pineapples, sugars from apples. Let's also have the conversation of that apple juice and an apple are two different things. An apple has all the enzymes and the micronutrients necessary to break down the sugars and the different micronutrients in the apple, but it does not have that in apple juice. Okay, apple juice is typically highly pasteurized, it's highly processed, and it's killed most of those. Not to mention there's sugar added back to apple juice, and there's all sorts of purification processes that include things like gelatin, which comes from pig hooves. And we're not aware of this. We're not having that awareness. The other issue with blood sugar and juices is you can eat an apple and your body would be like, oh, half an apple, thank you, that was enough apple, I don't want any more apple. But when you drink a glass of apple juice, you can get the quantities are 5 to 8 apples in that. And your body didn't have a chance to say, okay, thank you, that was enough, I've had enough. And so I don't recommend juice under any situation. I recommend good whole fruits and vegetables, but not juice itself. And that goes for something like V8 that has carrot juice and whatnot. If you're going to have a juice, a healthy juice, maybe that you juiced in your own kitchen, I suggest you do 1 carrot, 1 cucumber, 1 apple, not 4 apples and 6 carrots, because our body needs a chance to slow down and say, okay, hold on, that was enough. I didn't need 6 carrots right now. 6 carrots would cause stress and cause too much for my body to deal with, to consume right now. So these are conversations that we're going to have in multiple different levels. We'll talk about juicing at another time too, but I kind of want you to get is that if I consume 1 orange, and oranges used to be my addiction as a child. I could eat 15 oranges at a sitting, but now I'm allergic to oranges because I ate 15 oranges at a sitting when I was a kid because I'm from Florida. But if you sat down and peeled 1 orange, it's the time it takes to peel the orange pit is still on it. You have the pulp, you have the skin that's around the pulp. All of those things contain micronutrients and contain vitamins and minerals that are necessary for breaking down some of the macronutrients. And you have digestive enzymes involved with that too. And by the time you've gone through the process of peeling, which is why it's important to let your children, as soon as they're capable of peeling their own orange, to peel their own orange, because they get those enzymes on the tips of their fingers, and then they put it in their mouth. They're getting it more so than if you completely clean it and then give it to them. That also goes for like apples. The apple peel is highly digestive, and the apple seeds have a small amount of arsenic in them and are very great for helping deworm you. And yes, I know that sounds like, oh, it's toxic, it's poison. It is. But in the small doses that it's contained in the apple seeds, it's actually very beneficial and probably should be consumed with the apple. So just like watermelon seeds help you actually break down and use the micronutrients that are in the watermelon and help you absorb the water into a cellular level. So there's a lot of conversations to have there. But I want to go back to the probable causes of gestational diabetes. So obviously diet is the biggest cause. If you are consuming a lot of high fructose corn syrup, do not be shocked when your pancreas and your liver become sluggish. You'll know it's diet related if the diet changes, automatically the gestational diabetes disappears. I encourage those with gestational diabetes to immediately start a ketogenic diet. I don't like a strict ketogenic because I don't think it's healthy during pregnancy, but I like a somewhat ketogenic, a lax ketogenic diet. This will give us a good idea whether or not this was diet-induced gestational diabetes. If there was an illness right before the gestational diabetes came up, then I would look at the type of illness. And this is where I want to go with this. Okay, so give me a minute here. I will be including all of these links, just like always. So look at this. This is a type of strep. And we're going to have this conversation. We're going to talk about toxins here in a minute. But this type of strep, now I want you to point out streptomyces, and then don't make me say these words. Acromogenes, okay, is particularly toxic in the insulin-producing beta cells of the pancreas in mammals. It is used in the medical field as a chemotherapy drug for treating certain cancers, but medical research should produce an animal model for type 1 diabetes. It is also an antibiotic effect on gram-negative bacteria, but there's a definite role between different streps and type 1 diabetes. So if strep has been in the family going on, even if you were asymptomatic, but you were exposed to strep, it would not hurt to treat yourself for strep. I can tell you what I particularly use for strep. I use the OGG, the onion, garlic, and ginger mix. So basically it's high fresh onion, high fresh garlic, high fresh ginger. And I make it into a raw syrup, either using honey or raw sugar. I'll do another, otherwise these videos will be way too long. And I would use that on a high dose basis. In other words, I would do that 4 or 5 times a day. Now, because it's already inducing gestational diabetes, if someone's already positive for gestational diabetes and we're having blood sugar problems, that OGG would already start to cause a problem. So then I would use the Coachella latte, which we've already covered that. But real quick, it is a tree bark from Mexico that stops the cell-to-cell communication of all the bacteria. And that's what I would use for that. I can't give exact dosing because that's a, on a client by client basis and according to their own, their own health and whatnot. But the other thing is that yeast, if you consume the guanciale latte for too long of a period of time, it can cause a yeast infection. So there's a balancing act there. But I definitely want you to consider that one of the probable causes of a acute onset strep is acute onset gestational diabetes is strep. Okay, here's some more information about strep. Okay, naturally found in the soil, Okay, animal models in type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Gestational diabetes is a little tiny bit different between type 1 and type 2, but the main difference is that the extra stress of pregnancy and the extra, the rigors of the load of being pregnant and cleaning out for the baby and doing all these things is harder on the liver and the pancreas. So that's the kind of the primary reason, which is why it goes away after you're no longer pregnant, typically. For some women, it never goes away. Some women, they had undiagnosed diabetes type 2 before they even came into pregnancy, and it just became diagnosed, and so then it's considered gestational diabetes. Boy, there's a lot of conversations here too. I'm going to include this for your reading because this is one of those things where right here. So I want you to read 3, 2, 1. So this is a type of induced diabetes. The symptoms here are going to be different. Another have a woman who is perfectly stable, has no testing for blood sugar, isn't going to have any symptoms of gestational diabetes, and all of a sudden they're going to be sick. And when they get done being sick, they're going to feel weak. They're going to feel like sugar is impacting them differently. They're going to be very thirsty, and it's going to be almost like a sudden onset. Okay, so a lot to cover here. Is that all I wanted to cover? Again, I'm using the test strips. Let me get that. I'm using these test strips on a regular basis in place of like looking for symptoms. And if I'm getting positive on these test strips, I move to the finger sticks. Okay. And I guess that's all I'm going to cover on this one. I'm going to be back in a few minutes, and we're going to cover basically my overall urinalysis, and then we're going to actually divide this off and just do type 1 diabetes, the sudden onset, and the probable causes of type 1 alone in children, and what we can do about it, and what you can expect. Okay. All right. Bye, guys, for right now.